Moon's Transformers War for Cybertron. Easily the greatest video game to be based off the greatest giant robot franchise. And its not too bad sequel, Fall of Cybertron, are the two most beloved parts of the now long past aligned continuity. Even if the true best part was the Rescue Bots series. Even still, those games have returned to the toy shelves in the style of the new Studio Series subline named Gamer Edition. Not a name I'm a big fan of, but I am still very excited to see these designs come to life in toy form, given how when the game first came out, we only got 5 characters, one with the wrong head, and the second game got 26, but half of those weren't even in the game. Air Raid wasn't a Shockwave retool. Heck, he wasn't even in FOC. This is why it's good to see these in a modern line. First, let's take a look at Barricade, the character who, much like his fellow Level 1 playable choice Brawl, was only in the game because he was in the '07 movie, and they wanted some of that cross-media synergy. His look in the game is very interesting, because it's trying to look like the old G1 Micromaster toy, but given more movie-like colors. Honestly, I never realized his colors looked this good in the game. Seriously, look at this render. He looks like just a dirty block of tin, and not this nice, dark soldier of the evil army of destruction. He was criticized for not having enough of the purple lights around his body that these characters are known for, but he only has this much of it in the actual game. So of course, this is how much of it the toy would have. This toy has actually seen a lot of criticism, and I don't know if I agree with that. People like to say he's too bulky and not articulated enough, to which I say, if this is too bulky, then you must hate a lot of Transformers toys, and high articulation count does not a good toy make. The only odd part of his heft is those wheels up on his thighs, and they just disappear on the game model, so I would rather keep them on the toy than have them be removable or something. Personally, I like to keep them untransformed myself. I feel they look nicer, and it may balance him a bit better, but given his lack of knees, balance isn't really a thing he can do. His arms are a bit of a letdown. The panels force his hands to be turned a weird way, and my right one loves to pop open. The right arm is also used for the most controversial part of this line, in the swappable gun arms, and I don't care for it. They say it was done because that's how the guns worked in the game, but they held them in their hands in the cutscenes, so that was an option. It's mostly upsetting just because he can hold the gun on his back when it's not used, but not the arm, and I can't stand when a toy can't carry every accessory. The car mode. The car mode is incredible. It's just a big monster brick with a rake on the front, crazy jet boosters on the back, and wheels that actually roll well. This is something we don't see enough of on modern bots anymore, so it must always be praised. Overall, this is a pretty fun, if flawed toy, and I'm sure we'll see it reused as the Nameless Goons at some point. Another toy to have received some controversy is this new take on Bumblebee, with many people questioning as to whether or not this is a better or more game-accurate version of the character. To which I say this is absolutely more game-accurate than the original. In terms of fun factor, no, it's not better than the OG, but I wouldn't call it worse either. Both toys couldn't really achieve getting the front of the car to become the chest, with the original looking too big and the new one pointing out too far. This new version has a more game-accurate sword that he can hold on his hand, whereas the old one has these clear red ones that pop out of the arms, which is a cool idea on paper, but honestly, I never liked these. They're so small and just look kinda lame on him. In terms of firearms, the original has this Hasbro-designed little pistol, and I like it a lot. It has that fun sci-fi feel of the old G1 guns without looking like any one of them. The Studio Series, on the other hand, has the same removable arm for authenticity gimmick, but instead of one gun, he gets 2, in the form of the pistol and the plasma cannon. I assume he has both of these because the pistol was his default gun in gameplay, but he used the cannon in the cutscenes. He has 5 tabs to store the weapons, 4 in his back and 1 on the roof of the car mode, and just like Barricade, they didn't make it possible to put the arm on there when his guns are being used. Also, this may be because of him being a much smaller guy, but it honestly looks like a mess to me. I'd rather have the storage than not, but I don't like the look of it. Overall, I think he may have too many weapons, but it is a nice loadout to recreate the feeling of playing as Bumblebee in the first game. That said, I do wish that for Cliffjumper that they had given him some of the weapons from the second game, since that's what most people remember him for actually being in, and not the DS game. Speaking of Cliffjumper, as much as I'd say the Bumblebee version of this mold is different but equal to the old one, I'd say Cliffjumper is better in every way. The original was made before Fall of Cybertron was a thing, and I think it was made just to keep the Cliffjumper name trademark. He's got this dark shade of red, and the neon which is supposed to be red on all Autobots is now yellow. Which I understand what they are trying to do as have an inverse of the Bumblebee colors, but it just doesn't look right to me. Also, the old toy has a G1 style head, and the new one has the Prime style head, because that's how he looked in the game, because the High Noon games are supposed to be in the same universe as the Prime series. Plus, I think this red Bumblebee-like helmet is a cooler look than the G1 Cliffjumper helmet, but that could just be me. The transformation on these guys can be kind of upsetting. You gotta line it all up just right, or else the car just won't work. Another holdover of the old mold, sadly. That said, when you line it up right, you have a very fun little space buggy here. It's compact and cool looking. Looks more like the game than the old one does. It rolls alright, and really has that feel of being a scout vehicle that zips across the battlefield. Definitely cooler looking than an oval with a cockpit. We also have this big pile of robotic muscle that is this version of Optimus Prime. Shocking how much bulk this guy really has. He looks like a gorilla, which is fitting given who his descendant is. Also, I like the head sculpt a lot, and I didn't think I would, because in the game he always looked very chubby-cheeked, and it didn't feel right. There is a lot of good to talk with this, so let's start with the bad. The Matrix of Leadership. He has one, and I wish he didn't. This has been a thing for a couple years now, where they want to always give the leaders the magical object that decided they are the leader, but they keep making it a tiny little thing that looks lame. Given how Transformers likes to pay so much attention to scale nowadays, you'd think they wouldn't let this one fly. That said, even with them being far too tiny, those guys can still hold it. Gamer Prime? Heck no. That's not going in any hands. I also can't help but think that including this is somehow the reason why his chest windows are silver instead of black, like they're supposed to be. It's just sad. Getting the Matrix with our Transformers used to be a cool add-on, and now it's kind of annoying. For the rest of what this guy is packed with, we of course got his Ion Blaster, and I never liked this gun in the game. It's supposedly overpowered, but it never really felt like it, and I never liked the design either. That said, I do think that much like the head, the gun looks much better as a toy than in the game. It's big, and almost feels more like a little melee bludgeon weapon than it does a gun. Also, unlike the cars, he can store his detached arm on his back, but not the gun, so we have the same problem. Continuing to talk about the guns, since the games were third-person shooters, of course you could pick up different weapons for your character, so you'd think you could easily swap the weapons between all the figures, and you can kinda do that. Megatron can use the Ion Blaster just fine, and Prime can use the Fusion Cannon technically. The problem is when you want to swap between the size classes. When I try to swap between Prime and B, B's weapons have a worryingly tight fit, and B is not packing Prime's gun at all. You can kinda get Barricade to use the Ion Blaster if you don't bend the elbow or touch the arm at all. The assault rifle does actually go on Prime's arm very well, which is nice. This is the gun he's using on the box art, so it is nice to at least give him that. Also, man, that gun looks so small on him. I bet when we get a Voyager, Ironhide, or Warpath in the line, they will come with larger versions of the same gun. He's also got the axe we know Prime for using in that one episode, and never again. And this time it's modular. You can pop that staff in half so he can hold it properly, and you can remove the blade for reasons. Speaking of the blade, it is lacking in paint, only having this tiny orange fade instead of the whole thing being orange, which just makes me wonder why it's even painted at all. You can swing the head open to give it the double-headed look it had in the opening movie, something I would not have wanted, but it's a nice touch. The truck mode. By Primus, this truck mode is amazing. I wish I had a larger version of it that the Ninja Turtles could sit in. That's how cool this truck mode is. But what about the lack of a bumper and the visible robot hands? I don't care. This is an amazing big rig to have bashing into the bad guys at playtime. I remember reading a quote from someone at High Moon saying that this truck was meant to invoke the feeling of a rhino charging across the battle lines, and I think they achieved it perfectly. Of course, with Optimus Prime, we had to get a Megatron to go with him. Here we have the Emperor of Destruction in a G1-inspired look in a tank mode, back before a G1-inspired look in a tank mode for Megatron were way too overdone and boring looking, which is basically every tank Megatron after these games. I think the thing that really makes this Megatron so enjoyable to look at is the purple lighting and the larger inclusion of the red that G1 Megs has always had, but is usually hidden behind the gray, like you're not supposed to know about it. Well, I feel making it a larger part of the character just makes him more appealing. He has some interesting details on his shoulders, like this tube with a spike on the top that I think is meant to be a callback to the gun barrel on his back in the old cartoon, and this collection of thorns on his left that looks a lot like the cowcatcher in tank mode. So is this supposed to be that, just shrunken down? I don't know. I guess his knees are something I should probably talk about. They can only bend 20%, and I've heard people say that this is a case of being misassembled in the factory. Well, looking at the joint, I don't think that's true. I feel like this is how it is meant to be assembled. Does this make the toy worse for limiting a piece of articulation? Well, not for me it doesn't. He's got his fusion cannon as expected. It's supposed to change slightly between his two modes, but this one is just in the vehicle variant, and that's fine. You can post it on his arm like Megatron is known for, but he still has the arm swapping gimmick, so you could also do this. The deluxe figure weapons also seem to fit onto him a bit better than Prime. I did always gravitate towards the pistol as a secondary weapon when playing as him in the game, so it is pretty nice to recreate it on this toy. He also has his mace, which feels very oversized, and he kinda has to hold it oddly, either at the very bottom of the staff, an underslung style, or you could put it in the place of his fusion cannon. I really like to place it on his back. It makes it feel like an ornamental decoration, like those war banner flags that samurai would wear into battle. The tank mode is pretty fun too. Looking at it, it almost feels more like a gun you would see mounted on the glove of a character in some sci-fi video game franchise. It feels so aerodynamic, like the Persuader from G.I. Joe. I do wish it had wheels, but no Transformers tank has had wheels for over the past decade. At least he slides really well. And that is how he moved in the game, so that counts, I guess? The point is, he is a cool-looking battle cannon, and has a lot of personality, and I wish more G1 Megatrons were like this. All in all, these are some pretty fun figures. They aren't the greatest things ever. They don't change the game of what Transformers is or anything, but they didn't have to. They just needed to be some enjoyable toys that make you remember the fun you had playing one of your favorite games. And I look forward to seeing what else we will get out of this line in the future.